But as it relates to the planning board, I look at this and say, well, Barbara, if you could help us understand this criteria we have in terms of how, in your experience as a planner, working with planning boards, is there a check and balance that we should be mindful of? What do you see here? And I'm not asking you to render a decision, just kind of walk us through maybe the criteria and where you see the relevance on either side of the column. Again, not putting you on the spot to draw a conclusion, just the relevance of the data we're looking at.
Sure, and if I could just preface any comments, this will be based on sort of years of experience as municipal council, not necessarily as planner the whole time. So I tend to start with statutory responsibilities and work from there because that's the way I see things. So I don't know if you want to lead, or the chair wants to lead the discussion through each of the particular criteria here, and then we can comment, or just wants me to offer just general comments just to start with, however the chair wants to proceed.
I think general.
Okay, so I will start with the checks and balances. I guess because I start with the boards, and I'm thinking mostly of the regulatory boards, planning board in particular, I don't see a planning board as the function, and I'm not sure it's correct to put a planning board in the position of serving as a check or balance against whatever the select board are pursuing. I just don't think it really fits what their role is under the statute, which is two roles really, which is their authority as approving subdivision plans or approval not required plans, where there are really specific statutory criteria for that, and their role as sort of fermenting ideas and bringing ideas for zoning bylaw changes to town meeting. I don't see either of those functions as really needing to or appropriately framed as balancing another center of authority. So that's sort of my initial comment on that. And I guess the other general comment is I have seen really great elected boards with really good leadership and really great service to the town. And I've seen elected boards, I'm not talking about this town, but elected planning boards elsewhere that didn't have those qualities. I've seen appointed boards be great. I've seen appointed boards just sort of stumble along. So I don't think it's a function of whether it's appointed or elected. It's always going to be dependent on the people. And if you have an elected board, you may come up, if there is a tradition, or if there can be a tradition of competitive races, that can be a good thing. But I guess I just don't, I always start with what is their statutory authority, and how can you get good people into those positions of exercising that authority. So those are my general comments.
Thank you, that's helpful. One thing that Truro has that's different than a lot of their towns is that we have a small number of candidates at all times because we're a small town. I imagine you go to a town like Newton and you can find 3 candidates for every position. In Truro, you're lucky to find one because we just don't have the number of people. So it always comes down to the quality of the people and their skills, right?
Right. And you may, I mean, and I guess I don't want to speak about in this town in particular, but you may get really great people. And there is some benefit to having a variety of, opinions or different kinds of expertise, whether it's appointed or elected. So I hate to say it depends, but sometimes it depends.
Brian, if I could throw you just a quick question.
Sure.
So I think something that was just said, Barbara, I think you just said it. I think it's something I've been saying for 3 years now, which gets lost in the shuffle of noise. And that's that, we shouldn't be making decisions on elected versus appointed, or really anything in the charter about what's happening today. It really needs to be, so for example, people don't like the elected people. Well, that doesn't mean the election process is incorrect, and that's why we have elections. So I think it's important, I guess. So with that in mind, understanding that this is, the longevity, the gravitas document, when you, in your experience, I'm going to put you in the spot a little bit. Again, not reflective of anyone today or even elected versus appointed, but in your opinion, working with planning boards professionally, this section here about, required training or expertise, do you think maybe help me understand, is that something that the average, Joe or Jane can step into and be effective? Or do you see that as an impediment that would require a more vetting through an appointment process?
So the training item, required training or expertise, and any citizen who's motivated can be trained. I don't like to think of these positions as, the province of people who already know about it. You have put me on one of my soapboxes, which is the law belongs to everyone. It belongs to everyone, and anybody who is motivated can get up to speed. So I don't like that. I don't like that criterion at all.
Mhm.
It's my observation on Truro, having lived in other towns in Massachusetts that are much larger, is that Truro has a very competent citizenry. We have a lot of smart people in Truro, and because of our size, I think they're more committed to Truro than they would be. I know I am, as a small town, more committed to Truro than I was when I lived in Weston or or Belmont or someplace like that. So I think we may be small, but we're smart and we're motivated.
Right.
I think to your point, Barbara, that shows that we're thin. We have vacancies in our committees because we just don't have the numbers, but by and large, we get really good people.
Right. Right. And I guess there should be no assumptions about what people can and can't understand. There's a kind of elitism about that troubles me. So that's just a point I would tuck away somewhere. There's all sorts of ways to learn about responsibilities under the statutes that the planning board administers. It can be done in-house. It can be done through training. There are a couple organizations to do training. KP Law can come talk to people. So I'm repeating myself.
Yep, no, fair enough.